Picture this, my husband stormed out, laughing as he called me a failure, his suitcase packed for a new life with his 28-year-old mistress, until I dropped a $98 million secret that turned his smug grin into a plea for mercy. What did I hide in that dusty photo album he mocked, and how did it send him straight to a jail cell? Betrayal, millions, and a twist you'll never see coming. Stick around to find out. Hit that subscribe button and help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. Let's uncover this wild ride together. The living room was dark, save for the faint glow of a single lamp flickering on the oak side table. I sat on the edge of our plush cream sofa, the one Ethan had insisted we buy 3 years ago because it screamed success. My hands trembled slightly as I clutched the photo album I'd spent weeks crafting. A labor of love to celebrate 25 years of marriage. 20 minutes ago, my husband had walked through the front door of our Atlanta suburban mansion, his polished loafers clicking against the hardwood floor, and shattered everything I'd built in my mind. His words still echoed in my ears, sharp and venomous. "You're a failure, Sarah. A pathetic shadow of the woman I married. I'm done with this fake life." He'd smirked, his green eyes glinting with something cruel, and added, "Lily's waiting for me. She's 28, vibrant, everything you wish you could be." But here's the thing he didn't know. I was sitting on a secret so big, it could make him drop to his knees and beg for forgiveness. And I wasn't about to let him walk out that door without a fight. "Ethan," I said, my voice low but steady, cutting through the tension hanging thick in the air. He paused mid-step, his suitcase already in hand, and turned to face me. The smirk was still there, plastered across his chiseled face like he'd already won. "Before you go, take a look at this." I held up the album, its leather cover catching the dim light. Each page was a memory: our wedding under the Georgia pines, the day we signed the papers for this house, the vacations to Tybee Island with our 2 kids who were now off at college. I'd poured my heart into it, thinking it might remind him of what we'd built together. But he didn't even glance at it. Instead, he laughed, a harsh, barking sound that bounced off the high ceilings. "What's this supposed to be, Sarah?" he said, tossing his head back like I'd told a bad joke. "Some desperate little scrapbook to guilt me into staying? You think this..." He snatched the album from my hands and flung it onto the coffee table, where it landed with a thud, pages splaying open. "Is going to change my mind? I've been choking on this marriage for years. Lily and I are starting fresh. She's got ambition, drive, everything you wasted away sitting in this house playing perfect wife." He straightened his tie, a sleek navy one I'd bought him last Christmas, and adjusted the cuffs of his tailored blazer. "She's waiting for me at the Ritz-Carlton right now. We're done." I didn't flinch. Not when he called me desperate, not when he threw 25 years of my life onto the table like it was trash. I just sat there, my hands folded in my lap, watching him preen like a peacock in front of a mirror he didn't even deserve. Ethan Brooks, 52, CFO of one of Atlanta's biggest real estate firms, thought he had it all figured out. He'd spent the last decade climbing the corporate ladder, coming home late with excuses about board meetings and client dinner, while I raised our kids, kept this house spotless, and smiled at every company gala like the dutiful wife he wanted. But I wasn't blind. I'd smelled the floral perfume on his shirts, too sweet, too young to be mine. I'd seen the way his phone lit up at odd hours, the way he'd angle it away from me with a tight smile. And now here he was, laying it all bare, thinking he'd caught me off guard. "Congratulations, Ethan," I said, my tone calm, almost too calm. I leaned back into the sofa, crossing my legs, the silk of my black dress rustling softly. "Sounds like you've got it all planned out. Lily, the Ritz, a shiny new life. But are you sure you know everything?" I tilted my head, letting a small, knowing smile tug at the corners of my lips. His smirk faltered for a split second, just long enough for me to catch it, before he masked it with a scoff. "What's that supposed to mean?" he snapped, his voice edged with irritation. He shifted his weight, the suitcase creaking in his grip. Don't start with your mind games, Sarah. I'm not in the mood. I've been honest with you, more than you deserve. Lily's the real deal. We're buying a penthouse in Midtown next month. You can keep this oversized cage and your sad little memories. I stood up then, smoothing my dress as I walked toward the coffee table where the album lay sprawled open. The photo on the top page caught my eye. Us on our honeymoon, laughing in the surf, my hair wild and his arms around me. Back when he still looked at me like I was enough. I picked it up gently, running my fingers along the edge. Honest, huh? I said, my voice soft but laced with something sharp. That's a funny word coming from you. 10 months is a long time to be honest, Ethan. Long enough to book secret weekends, to whisper promises to someone else while I was here, keeping this life together. But you know what's even funnier? I looked up at him, meeting his gaze head on. What? I've been doing these past 10 months. He froze, his hand tightening around the suitcase handle. What are you talking about? He said, his tone shifting from mockery to suspicion. For the first time that night, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Those same eyes that had sized me up and dismissed me 1,000 times before. He'd always thought he could read me like an open book, predict every tear, every plea, but not tonight. Ooh, I've been busy, I said, stepping closer, the album cradled in my arms like a shield. While you were out there building your little fantasy with Lily, I was building something too, something you're going to wish you hadn't underestimated. I paused, letting the words hang between us, heavy and deliberate. So go ahead, Ethan. Walk out that door, but don't say I didn't warn you. He stared at me, his jaw tightening, searching my face for a bluff. You're full of it, he muttered, but his voice wasn't as steady as before. Whatever game this is, it's not going to work. I'm leaving. Enjoy your lonely victory lap. He turned toward the door, his shoulders squared like he was reclaiming control. But I could see it, the slight hesitation in his step, the way his hand hovered over the doorknob. He didn't know it yet, but I'd already changed the rules of the game. As the door clicked shut behind him, I sank back onto the sofa, the album still warm in my hands. The silence was deafening, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like the calm before a storm. One I'd been brewing for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment to unleash. Ethan thought he was walking away a winner, but he had no idea what was coming, and I couldn't wait to watch it all unfold. The front door slammed shut, the sound reverberating through the empty house like a gunshot. I sat there on the sofa, the photo album still resting in my lap, its leather edges worn from my nervous fingers. Ethan was gone, off to the Ritz-Carlton with Lily, his 28-year-old mistress, thinking he'd just dropped a bomb and walked away unscathed. I could almost picture him now, strutting through the lobby in that navy blazer, smirking at the concierge as he handed over his platinum card. He thought he'd won, that he'd left me broken and grasping at memories. But he didn't know the half of it. 10 months ago, I'd started piecing together his lies, and tonight wasn't the end of our story. It was just the beginning of mine. I leaned forward, flipping the album open to a random page. There we were, 5 years ago, posing in front of a beach house on Tybee Island. Ethan's arm was slung around my shoulders, his grin wide and carefree, while I held a seashell up to the camera. Back then, I'd believed in us, in the life we'd built in this sprawling Atlanta suburb, in the promises we'd made under those Georgia pines. But that was before the late nights started piling up, before the excuses got flimsier. Board meeting ran long, he'd say, breezing through the door at midnight with his tie loosened. Client dinner, he'd mutter, avoiding my eyes as he scrolled through his phone. I'd nod, smile, pretend I didn't notice the faint whiff of jasmine clinging to his collar, a scent I'd never worn. It wasn't until last spring that I caught him off guard. I'd come home early from a book club meeting. Ethan didn't even know I'd left the house, and found him on the back patio, his phone pressed to his ear. The sliding door was cracked open just enough for me to hear him laugh, low and intimate, before he said, "Lily, don't worry, babe. Sarah's clueless. She'll never figure it out." My stomach dropped, but I didn't barge out there crying or screaming. I slipped back inside, my heart pounding, and stood in the kitchen until he hung up. When he came in, I was stirring a pot of soup, humming like nothing had happened. "Good day at work?" I'd asked, my voice syrupy sweet. He'd grunted a reply, oblivious to the storm brewing behind my smile. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to him, listening to his steady breathing, and decided I wasn't going to be the fool he thought I was. The next morning, while he was at the office, I started digging. I checked his shirts. More jasmine, faint lipstick smudges on one cuff. I found a receipt in his car for a weekend in Asheville, a trip he'd claimed with a team-building retreat. And then there was his phone, always locked with a passcode he'd changed a year ago. But Ethan wasn't as clever as he thought. I had watched him type it once, late at night when he thought I was asleep. 4/18, our anniversary. Irony's a funny thing, isn't it? I didn't dare unlock it then, but I filed it away, waiting for the right moment. For 10 months, I played the part, cooked his dinners, ironed his shirts, smiled at his half-hearted compliments about my homely charm. But behind the scenes, I was building something he'd never see coming. Every late night he spent working, I spent researching. Every secret call he took on the patio, I took notes. I tracked his patterns. Tuesday dinners that stretched past 11 p.m., weekend conferences with no itinerary. I even followed him once, tailing his sleek black Audi to a midtown cafe where he met her. Lily, all legs and ambition, laughing at his jokes like he was still the charmer I'd fallen for 25 years ago. I sat in my car across the street, snapping a photo through the window, my hands shaking, not with tears, but with resolve. 10 months is a long time to lie, Ethan, I said aloud now, my voice steady in the empty room. I flipped to another page in the album, our daughter's graduation. Ethan beaming in the crowd while I adjusted her cap. Long enough to book secret getaways, to whisper promises to someone else while I kept this family afloat. I stood up, pacing the hardwood floor, the click of my heels echoing in the silence. But you know what I did with those 10 months? I stopped by the coffee table, picking up the album again, cradling it like a weapon. I didn't just sit here crying. I built something. Something you're going to regret underestimating. Ethan's voice rang in my head, replaying his smug exit speech. Lily and I are buying a penthouse in Midtown. You can keep this cage, I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that surprised even me. A penthouse? With what money exactly? His CFO salary was hefty, sure, but I'd seen the credit card statements he thought I never checked. Thousands blown on jewelry, dinners, hotel suites. He was living beyond his means, betting on some big win to keep it all afloat. And Lily? She was just the cherry on top, a shiny trophy to stroke his ego, but he'd miscalculated one thing. Me. I walked to the window, peering out at the manicured lawn, the azaleas I'd planted glowing faintly under the streetlights. This house, our house, was a symbol of everything I'd poured into this marriage, and he thought he could just walk away, leave me with nothing but memories while he started over? Not a chance. I turned back to the album, flipping to the last page I'd finished, a blank space I'd left on purpose. It wasn't just a scrapbook anymore, it was a vault, hiding something that would turn his world upside down. I sank back onto the sofa, my mind racing back to 2 weeks ago when everything changed. I'd been sitting at the kitchen island, a cold cup of coffee in hand, staring at a lottery ticket I'd bought on a whim at the gas station. The numbers had been nagging at me all day: 6, 12, 19, 28, 41, 53. I'd pulled up the Georgia Mega Millions site on my phone, my breath catching as I matched them one by one. What I'd found was it Budweisers once were whoa, 6 numbers. $98 million after taxes. I'd checked it 3 times, my hands shaking so hard I dropped the phone. And the first thing I did? I didn't call Ethan. I called Diane Carter, the sharpest financial advisor in Atlanta, and started planning. Ethan thought he was leaving me in the dust, but he was about to learn that dust can hide a hurricane. The house was still the kind of quiet that presses against your ears after a storm. I stood by the window, the photo album tucked under my arm, watching the taillights of Ethan's Audi disappear down the cul-de-sac. He was gone, off to the Ritz-Carlton with Lily, thinking he'd just delivered the final blow. I could still hear his voice dripping with arrogance. You can keep this cage and your sad little memories. Sad little memories. The words stung, but not for long. I turned away from the window, a slow smile spreading across my face. If he only knew what those memories were hiding, what I'd been hiding. He'd be turning that car around right now, tires squealing, begging me to take him back. I walked back to the sofa, setting the album down on the coffee table with a deliberate thud. My fingers traced the leather cover, lingering on the embossed 25 years I'd had custom made at the stationery store downtown. It wasn't just a scrapbook anymore. It was my ace in the hole. I flipped it open to the last page, the blank one I'd left untouched, and reached into the pocket I'd sewn into the binding. My hands closed around a single sheet of paper, crisp and official, its edges slightly creased from being folded so many times. I pulled it out, unfolding it slowly, savoring the moment. There it was, in bold black ink, Georgia Mega Millions winner verification prize. $98 million, after taxes, $62,300,000. My ticket, my win, my future. It had happened 2 weeks ago on a Wednesday night I'd never forget. I'd been sitting at the kitchen island, alone as usual, a cold cup of coffee in one hand and a lottery ticket in the other. Ethan was out, another client dinner, he'd said, and I'd picked up the ticket on a whim earlier that day, tossing it into my purse with the grocery receipts. I don't even know why I checked it. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe it was fate. I'd pulled up the Mega Millions site on my phone, the numbers glowing on the screen. 6, 12, 19, 28, 41, 53. My eyes darted to the ticket, then back to the screen, then back again. One by one, they matched. My heart stopped. I checked it 3 times, my hand shaking so hard I dropped the phone onto the counter with a clatter. $98 million. After taxes, $62 million. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I just sat there staring at those numbers, afraid to blink in case they disappeared. The first person I called wasn't Ethan. It wasn't even my kids. It was Diane Carter, the financial advisor whose name I'd seen in a Forbes article about Atlanta's power players. I'd met her once at a charity gala Ethan dragged me to, and she'd struck me as sharp, no nonsense. Exactly who I needed. Diane, I'd whispered into the phone at 2 a.m., my voice barely audible. I need your help. I just won the lottery, a lot of it. She didn't laugh or ask if I was drunk. She just said, "Stay calm, Sarah. Don't tell anyone. Meet me at my office tomorrow, 8 a.m. sharp." And that's what I did. For the next 10 days, while Ethan was busy sneaking off with Lily, I was busy securing my future. Diane brought in a team of lawyers, experts in lottery winnings, she said. And we worked fast. The money was deposited into a trust, ironclad and untouchable, registered under my name alone. Georgia law was clear. Lottery winnings claimed before a divorce were separate property, not marital assets. Ethan couldn't touch a dime, no matter how much he fought. I'd even started house hunting in my head. Maybe that Buckhead estate he'd always drooled over, the one with the infinity pool and the skyline view. I'd buy it in cash, just to rub it in his face. But first, I had to let him walk into the trap he'd set for himself. I folded the verification paper and slipped it back into the album, my mind racing back to tonight. Ethan's smug exit had been the perfect opening. I'd waited for this moment, rehearsed it in my head 100 times. I grabbed my phone and dialed Diane, who picked up on the second ring. "He's gone," I said, my voice steady now. "Left with his suitcase, bragging about Lily and their penthouse. It's time." "Good," Diane replied, her tone clipped and professional. "You've got everything in place. The trust is secure. The lawyers are ready. He doesn't suspect a thing." "Not yet," I said, glancing at the album. "But he will soon." I hung up, my pulse quickening. I didn't have to wait long. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed, a text from Ethan. Forgot my charger, coming back in 5, don't try anything stupid. Perfect. I stood up, smoothing my dress, and moved to the desk in the corner, where I'd stashed a few extra surprises. By the time he walked back through that door, I'd be ready to drop the bomb. The headlights of his Audi swung into the driveway, cutting through the darkness. I heard the car door slam, then his footsteps on the porch. The front door creaked open, and there he was, framed in the entryway, his smirk still intact. "Miss me already?" he said, tossing his keys onto the side table. "Where's my charger? Let's make this quick." I stepped forward, the album in my hands, and met his gaze. "Oh, it'll be quick," I said, my voice cool and deliberate. "But before you go, there's something you should see." I opened the album to that blank page, pulling out the verification paper with a flourish. His eyes narrowed as I held it up, the Georgia Mega Millions logo glinting under the lamp. 2 weeks ago, I won $98 million, Ethan, after taxes. That's $62 million, all mine. And according to Georgia law, you don't get a penny. His smirk vanished. The keys slipped from the table to the floor with a soft clink as he stared at the paper, his face draining of color. "You're lying," he whispered, but his voice cracked, betraying him. He lunged forward, snatching the sheet from my hand, his eyes darting over the numbers, the seal, the amount spelled out in bold. This can't be real." "Oh, it's real," I said, crossing my arms. "And while you were planning your little escape with Lily, I was planning this. The money's in a trust locked down by lawyers you can't afford to fight. I even bought that Buckhead house you always wanted, cash, under my name. You're not walking away with a penthouse, Ethan. You're walking away with nothing." He stumbled back, the paper crumpling in his fist. "Sarah, wait a minute," he stammered, his bravado gone. "We can talk about this." I smiled, cold and triumphant. "Too late for that." Ethan stood there in the doorway, the crumpled lottery verification paper trembling in his hand. The smug CFO who'd swaggered out 10 minutes ago was gone, replaced by a man whose world was unraveling faster than he could grasp. His green eyes darted from the paper to me, then back again, as if he could will the numbers to disappear. The silence stretched between us, thick and electric, until he finally choked out, "Sarah, wait. Let's talk about this." His voice was a desperate rasp, a far cry from the mocking tone he'd used when he called me a failure. I didn't move, didn't flinch. I just stood there, arms crossed, the photo album still open on the coffee table like a silent witness to his downfall. "Talk?" I said, arching an eyebrow. "Funny, you didn't want to talk when you were packing your suitcase for Lily, or when you told me I'd wasted 25 years of your life." I stepped closer, my heels clicking against the hardwood, each sound a punctuation mark to his panic. "What's there to talk about now, Ethan? The fact that I'm walking away with $62 million while you're left with nothing? Or maybe the penthouse you promised Lily, the one you can't afford anymore?" He dropped the paper, letting it flutter to the floor, and ran a hand through his hair, tugging at the strands like he could pull himself back together. "Sarah, honey," he said, his tone softening into something syrupy, something I hadn't heard in years. "I messed up, okay? I got caught up with Lily, but it's not real. You're my wife. We've got 25 years together, kids, this house. That means something." He took a step toward me, his hands outstretched like he was reaching for a lifeline. "Let's work this out. I'll call her right now. End it. We can use this money. Together." I laughed. A sharp, cold sound that made him flinch. "Together?" I said, tilting my head. "You mean the way we were together when you booked that romantic weekend in Asheville with her? Or when you used our joint account to buy her that sapphire necklace I found the receipt for?" I said, "Oh, don't look so surprised, Ethan. I've known about Lily for months. I've got photos, receipts, even a voice recording from one of your little patio chats. Sarah's clueless," you said. "Well, surprise." I'm not. He stumbled back, catching himself against the wall. You've been spying on me? He stammered, his voice rising with a mix of shock and indignation. What kind of wife does that? The kind who's tired of being played? I shot back, my voice steady as steel. The kind who doesn't sit around crying while you blow our savings on your mistress. But that's not even the best part. I turned to the desk in the corner, pulling open the top drawer where I'd stashed my ace. I lifted out a stack of papers, bank statements, emails, company records, and held them up for him to see. While you were busy with Lily, I was busy with this. You've been skimming money from the company, Ethan. Thousands funneled into a side account for your new venture with Lily's dad. The board found out this morning. They fired you at 9 a.m. His knees buckled, and he sank onto the arm of the sofa, his breath coming in shallow gasps. That's impossible, he whispered, shaking his head. They can't prove anything. Oh, they can, I said, tossing the papers onto the coffee table. They landed with a satisfying smack, scattering across the album. I've got copies of everything, transfers, emails you sent to your buddy Mark in accounting, telling him to keep it quiet. You thought I wouldn't notice the missing $50,000 from our joint account last month? I fed it all to Diane's team, and they fed it to the board. You're not just out of a job, Ethan. You're looking at charges. Embezzlement's a felony, last I checked. He lunged for the papers, his hands shaking as he rifled through them, his eyes wide with panic. You set me up, he snarled, his voice cracking. You planned this whole thing. The money, the lottery, all of it. Oh! You're trying to ruin me. No, I said, stepping back, my tone calm and final. You ruined yourself. I just made sure I'd come out on top. His phone buzzed on the side table, the screen lighting up with Lily's name. He froze, staring at it like it was a live grenade. Go ahead, I said, nodding toward it. Answer it. She's probably wondering why her knight in shining armor isn't at the Ritz yet. He grabbed the phone, his hands fumbling as he swiped to answer. Lily, he started, but her voice cut through, loud enough for me to hear even from across the room. Where the hell are you, Ethan? My dad's pissed. He just pulled the investment because you didn't show. We're screwed. Ethan winced, holding the phone away from his ear as she kept yelling. I couldn't help it. I smiled, a small, satisfied curve of my lip. Sounds like your penthouse dreams are crumbling, I said. Better start explaining. He hung up, slamming the phone down, and turned to me, his face contorted with rage and desperation. You think you've won? He spat, standing up, looming over me. I'll fight you, Sarah. I'll drag this through every court in Georgia. You'll spend that money on lawyers before you ever enjoy it. But I didn't blink. Go ahead and try, I said, meeting his gaze. But you might want to save your energy. The police will be here soon. His eyes widened, and before he could respond, a sharp knock echoed through the house. I walked to the door, my steps measured, and opened it to reveal 2 officers in uniform, badges glinting under the porch light. Mrs. Brooks, one of them said, tipping his hat. We're here for Ethan Brooks. Embezzlement and fraud charges filed by his employer this afternoon. Ethan staggered back, his face ashen. Sarah, don't do this, he pleaded, his voice breaking as the officers stepped inside. I'll sign anything, divorce papers, whatever you want. Just call them off. I shook my head, watching as they cuffed his wrists. You should have thought of that before you called me a failure, I said. Enjoy your new life, Ethan. I hear jail cells are cozy this time of year. The officers led him out, his head bowed, his blazer wrinkled and defeated. As the door closed behind them, I picked up the lottery paper from the floor, smoothing it out. This wasn't just a win. It was justice. The ocean stretched out before me, a shimmering expanse of blue kissed by the late afternoon sun. I sat on the porch of my new beach house in Savannah, a glass of iced tea sweating in my hand, the salty breeze tugging at my hair. It had been a year since that night in Atlanta, since Ethan's cuffs clicked shut and the police cruiser pulled away, taking him and his lies out of my life for good. The photo album sat on the wicker table beside me, its leather cover faded from the coastal air, but I didn't need to open it anymore. Those memories belonged to a different Sarah, one who thought she needed a man like Ethan to define her worth. Now, with $62 million in the bank and a future I'd built from the ashes, I was someone else entirely. The move to Savannah had been impulsive, a decision made in the giddy haze of my first week as a multimillionaire. I'd driven down the coast with Diane, my financial advisor turned friend, scouting properties until I found this place. A sprawling white house with wraparound porches and windows that framed the Atlantic like a painting. I'd bought it in cash, no mortgage, no haggling, just a signature and a smile. The Buckhead estate I'd taunted Ethan with, I'd bought that too. But I'd turned it into the headquarters for my new venture, Break Free, a foundation to help women escape financial abuse. It was more than a house now. It was a symbol, a middle finger to the years I'd spent trapped in his shadow. Life after Ethan's arrest unfolded like a dream I hadn't dared to dream. The media had a field day at first, headlines screaming Atlanta CFO busted in embezzlement scandal and wife's lottery win seals his fate. Reporters camped outside our old house for a week, but I was already gone. Sipping coffee in Diane's office while she handled the press. Ethan took a plea deal, 7 years in prison for embezzlement and fraud, plus a promise to testify against his shady partners. Lily vanished from the scene, last I heard, fleeing to Florida after her father's investment deal collapsed. I didn't care enough to keep tabs. They'd made their beds. I was too busy making my life. Break Free became my purpose. With Diane's help, we'd funneled a chunk of the lottery money into it. Grants for women stuck in marriages like mine, legal aid for those fighting to keep their kids, training programs to get them back on their feet. Every story I heard echoed mine in some way. The husband who controlled the bank accounts, the years of gaslighting, the slow realization that freedom was worth more than comfort. Last month, we'd helped a woman named Carla, a single mom from Decatur, buy her first home after escaping a decade of financial manipulation. She'd hugged me at the ribbon cutting, tears streaming down her face, and said, "You gave me my life back." I'd smiled and told her, "No, you did that. I just handed you the keys." My phone buzzed on the table, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a text from Diane. "Foundation's latest grant just cleared. Another $2 M in the pot. Drinks tonight to celebrate?" I grinned, typing back a quick, "You're on." The money kept growing. Smart investments, Diane's magic touch. But it wasn't about the numbers anymore. It was about what it could do, who it could reach. I set the phone down and picked up the morning paper instead, flipping to the local section. There I was, a small headline, "Lottery Winners, Foundation Changes Lives in Savannah." Below it, a photo of me at our last gala, laughing with a group of women who'd turned their scars into strength. I barely recognized myself, hair loose, eyes bright, no trace of the timid wife Ethan had mocked. A few weeks ago, an unexpected letter had arrived, its prison postmark stark against the crisp envelope. Ethan. I let it sit on my desk for days unopened before curiosity won out. Inside were 3 pages of his cramped handwriting, apologies, excuses, a claim he'd found peace behind bars. He wrote about missing me, about regretting Lily, about wanting to make amends when he got out. The kicker? He'd heard about Break Free's success and suggested we work together after his release, maybe use my money to rebuild our legacy. I'd laughed so hard I nearly cried, then fed the pages into the shredder without a second thought. Some things never changed. Ethan was still scheming, still sniffing for an angle, even from a cell. That night at the gala Diane dragged me to, I'd shared the story over champagne with David, a widowed investor who'd become one of Break Free's biggest donors. He'd chuckled, his gray eyes crinkling at the corners, and raised his glass. "To people who don't learn," he said, "and to those who do." We'd clinked glasses, the room buzzing around us with women whose lives we'd touched. Some now running businesses, others speaking at events like this one, their voices loud and unapologetic. David nodded toward them. "You've built something real here, Sarah. Ethan never saw it coming." "Neither did I admitted, sipping my drink, "but I'm glad I did." Later, I'd told him about the album, how I donated it to the Savannah History Museum for an exhibit on resilience. It sat in a glass case now, open to that blank page where I'd hidden the lottery paper, a plaque beneath it reading, "Sometimes freedom hides in the places we least expect." David had smiled, a quiet respect in his gaze, and said, "To breaking chains." I'd added "and building bridges," thinking of every woman we'd lifted up, every life we'd changed, including mine. I set the paper down now, the sun dipping lower, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. The waves crashed softly against the shore, a rhythm that had replaced the chaos of Atlanta's suburbs. I didn't need Ethan's approval, his money, or his lies anymore. I had this: $62 million, a foundation, a home by the sea, and a purpose that woke me up every morning. Revenge wasn't about destroying him, though watching him crumble had its perks. It was about this: building a life so full, so mine, that his shadow couldn't touch it. As the last light faded, I stood, stretching, and headed inside. Tomorrow, I'd meet Carla for coffee. She wanted advice on starting a bakery. After that, a call with Deanne about expanding Break Free to Charleston. Ethan's world had shrunk to a prison cell, but mine was just beginning.